A push for new powers for Europe's new asylum agency to better manage the flow of asylum seekers and better ensure European security. Hello and welcome to People First, the EPP Group's monthly program on issues with impact on people like you. Joining us to answer some of your questions is Carlos Coelho. You are the EPP Group's shadow rapporteur on this proposed legislation that would further empower European asylum authorities. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you about this decision by U.S. President Donald Trump to slam the door on immigrants coming from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. What kind of impact could that have here in Europe?
Definitely bad impact. We are facing a global problem, a world problem, and definitely the solution is not to close the borders, neither discrimination. We need to help people who are flying from war, from terror, from annihilation.
And this is something that Europe is also struggling with, and this proposed legislation is supposed to make it better, not only for Europeans, but also for the asylum seekers. Let's take a closer look at that in the details in our report.
The European asylum system reform package has been months in the works, but now inter-party negotiations are speeding up. More recent drownings of migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean to Europe have added to the urgency. A record 5,000 migrants were reported dead or missing there last year. The reform package would create a new European Agency for Asylum, replacing the current European Asylum Support Office. This new agency will allow the EU to increase its support for member states to deal with the refugee crisis. The measures aim to improve the EU's Common European Asylum System, or CEAS. They include a monitoring system to assess compliance by member states. That's to ensure asylum seekers are properly registered and processed. The reform package deals with how asylum seekers are distributed among EU member states, and it allows the EU to intervene in an emergency when a member state is unable to deal with the flow of migrants entering its territory.
Some of these issues are rather delicate, and they depend on how much solidarity that we can get from EU member states. How much hope do you have that we can see more solidarity?
Definitely we need more solidarity, not only between member states, but between member states and European institutions, and between member states and European agencies. That's why we need a stronger agency for asylum, with means to help member states to deliver a good welcome to refugees.
Okay, and let's first go to our first Vox Pop question, this one having to do with the deadly drama in the Mediterranean.
I was wondering how this agency thinks of what they're going to do to save people from drowning in the sea. What could they do about that?
Okay, a question on how this new agency actually could help to better take care of the migrants and prevent them from drowning in the Mediterranean.
Chris, let's be frank. This agency has no competence on safe and rescue. But the European Parliament approved the law in 2014, deciding that Frontex missions should have as priority saving lives on sea. And the new Coast Guard has the same kind of priority. So European institutions already took the decisions to help people and to prevent that drowning on sea.
Okay, and once they get to land, how are they being treated? And that's an issue that somebody's asked us about as well.
Me gustaría saber qué medidas se van a tomar para mejorar la situación de los refugiados.
So that's a situation in Europe as well as in Turkey, because we have this agreement with Turkey on dealing with the migrants. How can this new agency help to improve conditions?
These new agents will have more powers, more people and more funding, helping member states not only to processing the refugees and the asylum seekers, but also to provide better conditions for them, especially for minors and for single mothers, because they need proper care.
And what about this issue of EU intervention? How much can the EU actually intervene in an EU member state that cannot handle the flow of migrants?
Helping member states to deal with the huge influx of people, we should prevent and react. That means we should help member states to prevent the crisis, force them to comply with the rules, with the European rules, and be sure they are with all the means to fulfill their obligations. And reacting if the member states have not the means during the crisis, the agency should supply the member states with 500 people and all the means and the fundings the new asylum will have.
Somebody might come back and say this is a sovereignty issue, that the EU should not intervene. What do you think?
The key word is solidarity. The reason why we need a better and stronger agency, it's because we realize only at European level we will be able to deal with this issue in a proper way.
Now, another hotly debated issue is distributing the migrants who come into Europe. And here's a question from somebody from a country, the country that has accepted most of those migrants.
Ich würde gerne wissen, wie die EU es schaffen kann, die anderen Staaten zu motivieren oder es hinzubekommen, dass alle Staaten bei dem Projekt mitmachen.
Okay, Stefan is from Germany. There are going to be elections in Germany this year. How can this new agency help in that regard?
Neither Germany nor any other member state alone can deal with this problem.
Alone?
Alone. We need a European solution and we need European solidarity. That's why we are trying to build up a new agency.
And among those migrants and those who are asking for asylum, there's this Dublin process. And some people say that this Dublin process, the Dublin rules, are dead. What do you think, and what should replace them?
The European Commission presented a proposal and we are discussing that right now in the Parliament. Let me be clear. Dublin doesn't answer to a huge influx of people. The kind of obligations we are putting on the frontline member states is quite impossible to answer under current Dublin regulation. That's why we need a new Dublin regulation and we are going to find solutions for that.
And then how do we slow the inflow? Here's a question on that.
Comment éviter l'émigration et comment les aider? Ils ont éventuellement fui leur pays pour trouver une protection, un Eldorado, mais l'Eldorado, c'est pas ni la France, ni la Belgique, ni nulle part. Hein. Et comment faire pour les aider pour rester chez eux?
Okay, now that concerns predominantly economic migrants. It's a development question. How do you deal with that?
There is a difference between economic migrants and asylum seekers or refugees. Regarding economic migrants, we can decide what we really need. And for those who are not legally in Europe, we can send them back. But regarding asylum seekers and refugees, we have the legal and the moral obligation to receive them. And that's what we should do.
And that concerns countries like Syria. Here's a question on that.
My question is more about migrants who are in exile in our country, avoiding their own country who's in war. So why don't you just do something to fix their countries, like real international help?
So that's really what set off this migrant crisis. Is Europe powerless?
Europe is not powerless, but we cannot address the problem alone. It's a problem for the international community and there is different agendas. For instance, Mr. Putin's and Russia policy for Syria is completely different. Europe, however, remains the biggest donor in humanitarian aid. And that's something we should be proud of because there is no other way to solve the problem or to decrease the flow of refugees either than trying to solve the problems at the origin.
Because without that funding, things would be a lot worse, obviously.
Definitely.
Carlos Coelho, thanks for being our point man on migration today and on asylum. Your job is far from over. Thanks very much for joining us on People First. Find out more about the activities of the largest political force in Parliament by checking eppgroup.eu. Until next time, thanks for watching.